Here, Katie is. Katie Hempel is she's the office administrator for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the federal court. She will continue her own introduction.
Okay. I think I'm going to just use this one. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for joining this session today. There are a lot of you. I have the coveted position of right after lunch in a nice warm room with a little bit of dim lighting. So if I make any sudden loud noises, just know that I caught someone sleeping. So as Whitney said, I'm from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. There's not a lot of us here from the federal court system. A little bit about our court. We are one of 13 appellate courts for the federal system. We have national jurisdiction and hear a variety of cases such as patent and trademark law, veterans affairs, those sort of things. Nothing criminal, so we're a little different. I love coming to these conferences because I get to learn more about what other court systems use. Today we're going to be talking about onboarding, and we've presented this to several other organizations and different courts within the federal system and have found that our program has worked well in being adapted into other types of courts because it's a very general sort of template that you can use. As Whitney mentioned, this is part of the Core Champion Achievement Program. I noticed a lot of people who had signed up for this are either early career professionals like myself or first-time attendees. So just a little background for anyone who might not be familiar with what the Core Champion program is. So the core is a set of 13 competencies designed by NACM that fall under the 3 modules that you'll see here, which is vision, principle, and practice. And you can see that workforce management falls under practice, so that's what competency this session will be addressing today. You can find more information about the curriculum for any of these on the NACM Core website. The Achievement Program has 3 main purposes. That's to strengthen court professionals, to increase exposure to the core competency program, and to recognize attendance through certificates. So if you attend these programs and turn in your structured responses, you can get credits and earn certificates. And you can see here there's 5 different levels of achievement, starting with your explorer up to the champion. So when you see people talking about the core champion, that means someone who has completed the curriculum for all 13 competencies of the core. If you want to sign up for a program, all you have to do is attend the session and then complete the structured response. And you can see that these are the steps. These are the steps that you go through. You get the application, you get your award. To get the achievement award, you have to write an article. You can possibly get published out of it. You get recognition, et cetera. There's a lot better information that you can get from someone from the core working group, which you might have seen at the last business meeting. So before we kind of get into the meat of everything, I want to start with a little bit of discussion. And I'm hopeful that, I can see everybody sitting close to someone. I'm really hopeful that you're sitting close to some people that don't work at your court. The reason for this, I want some discussion about practices in courts, and you're probably not going to get some great ideas from people in your own court because you already know what you do. So I want you to turn to the people who are around you. We're going to take about 5 minutes and talk to them about what your court does when someone new starts. What are your practices? What do they go through? How do you set up their onboarding or orientation when they get started? For those people who are participating virtually, I understand that you should be able to chat together in the group chat. So if you can share some ideas in there, and then we'll come back and discuss. So take about 5 minutes, turn to your neighbor, and have some discussion. Okay. All right, thank you guys. So it sounds like we're having some good, lively discussion. So who would like to share either something that your court does or maybe something interesting that you learned that another court does in your discussion?
Mike.
Okay, now that I'm sharing means I won't be called on again, right? So I'm with the State Courts Administrator's Office, but the individuals I met were with an individual court, so they're at the local level. And they do a lot of the onboarding for various positions. And so what I learned and I really liked was that they do like a 6 weeks training program, and they will have them sit in court, observe court, just to get their feet wet, and then they will start to shadow, and then they actually don't assume their role for approximately 6 weeks, which is really good, I think. I mean, it's really, because we do a lot of hands-on training, so sometimes I'm like, here you go, swim,
Yeah.
you know. So I really like the idea of trying to train more, and I thought that was very helpful.
Who else has something to share?
We do have a comment from the chat,
Okay.
if anybody wants to respond. One second. So Tristan Worthen says, anyone out there with an onboarding process? We do with our law clerks here at the Washington Court of Appeals, but we do not for any new employees or judges. I have a new employee and a judge beginning on August 1st.
Okay, great. Well, stay tuned because by the end of this session, you should be able to create a new onboarding program if I've done my job well. All right, so thank you guys all for sharing. So sounds like there are some good things going on. A lot of people kind of staying quiet, so maybe there's some things that need refreshing. So what I want you to get out of this presentation today, first, we're going to talk about why you want to do an onboarding program. So just kind of understand the fundamentals and the reasoning behind it. Then we're going to talk about how to structure and conduct a successful onboarding program. And finally, I'm going to give you some ideas for learning materials using visual, auditory, and interactive methods of instruction. I'll be using my court as an example, but basically you can swap in and swap out whatever is most applicable to your court. So to get started, why should you onboarding? Does anybody have any ideas about why you would want to do an onboarding program? Nope.
To help employees be successful.
Okay. You want your employees to be successful? That's very generous of you. Yeah.
Because hiring, training, and then if somebody leaves, that's very costly.
Yeah. Retention. Retention is a huge one, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So thinking about when a new employee starts at your court, or think about when you started at your last position. When you start in a new position, you have very unclear expectations. You don't know what is expected of you, and you don't know what you can expect of other people. So whoever's starting in your court is going to be feeling that same way. Everything is new. All the new systems, a whole new building, a whole new job. So it's a way to start to ease people into it. And then to have office integration. And so what you just mentioned earlier about having your new employee shadow and get an understanding of what the court process is before they start their job-specific training can help integrate them into the office because they'll be able to recognize what other people do and how the court works as a whole. So by doing a successful onboarding program, you're going to reduce stress and introduce structure for your new employee. A study by the Brandon Hall Group, it's called The True Cost of a Bad Hire, talks about how doing a successful onboarding program can reduce turnover. So it actually found that you can improve new hire retention by up to 82%, And conversely, having poor assimilation is going to lead to an earlier departure. So exactly what you said. It's also a little bit selfish from the organization's perspective because you don't want to have to keep hiring new people because they keep quitting and leaving early. And I am having some issues with my PowerPoint here. Additionally, this can help to prevent siloing. So if you're not familiar with this term, siloing is basically where you have different sections within an organization, and they each have their own role, but they might not be sharing information. So one section may not really understand what another section does. Now, if your case management team doesn't understand what your court services team really does, how can they really properly work together? So you want to avoid that. You want to have people having a full understanding of your court operations and how your office all works together before they really get into their role. Next, we're going to talk about what onboarding actually is. So does anyone have an idea of what does that word mean? What do we mean when we say onboarding? We have Whitney. It's your cue.
Greetings. I think it refers to when new hires join an organization and helping them to understand and find their way, learn about the court culture, learn the environment, the politics, how things work, and it goes to what you were just talking about, ensuring that they understand what they bought into or what journey they've agreed to embark on with that organization. And when you have done that well, then it minimizes the cost of training, and I think over the long term sets the path to succession planning. So that's what I think.
I like that, thinking all the way ahead to succession planning, this new person and when they might actually even work up into a leadership role. So that's a very comprehensive definition. I'm going with the short one. That is just the process by which new hires are integrated into the organization. And it includes exactly what you said, the court culture and all of the things that you really want to do to assimilate and to integrate somewhat into your organization. So we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between orientation and onboarding, because I think a lot of people use these terms interchangeably. And when I first started, we were calling it orientation. And then after doing some reading on some different methods, we're like, actually, what we want to do is we want to onboard. We don't just want to orient. So an orientation is a one-time event. And this is a brief introduction to your organization. And this is what a lot of, I think, organizations do, where if someone starts, you give them the building tour, you show them where the kitchen is, the bathrooms, here's your keys to the courtroom, here's whatever things you need, now get to your job, right? Conversely, an onboarding program is a series of events and training, and it helps employees actually get integrated into the organization. I think this will make more sense as we go along, what it means to integrate rather than just to, throw them in. And it includes orientation. So those things, your building tour is important because you need to know where the snack room is, of course. But you want to show them a little bit more about what it means to work for your organization. So one way to think about it is like this. So when you start a new job, it's like you're being thrown overboard, right? You're in the ocean. Orientation is like giving someone a life raft. It's going to help you stay afloat, but it's not really going to give you much direction or help you to get to where you want to be. An onboarding program is like joining a team of rowers, right? So it helps you to actually be part of that team and to get from point A to point B and be successful in your job. So we're going to talk about the 5 core pillars of onboarding. I don't think you can probably read it from here, but the slides are online. These come from the onboarding best practices from the Arvis Institute. I did not come up with them myself, although I wish I could take credit. So the 5 core pillars of onboarding, the first is organizational culture. Then we have the vision and direction of leadership, your team dynamics, your systems, processes, and deliverables, and your goals and expectations. We're going to go into each of these a little bit more in depth. I would suggest if you are a note taker, these are 5 things that you might want to note down, because as we go along, you might get some ideas that pop up of, oh, this is how I can address team dynamics in my court and introduce a new hire to that. So these are some good pillars to keep in mind. Or take photos of, as I see people doing. And again, the slides are on the app. So the first one is your organizational culture. Organizational culture is the collection of values, expectations, and practices that guide and inform the actions of all team members. It is the traits that make your organization what it is. So in thinking about how to introduce a new employee to your organizational culture, some questions that you might want to ask yourself are, what does high performance look like within your team? What expectations do you have of your team members? And what does your organization value? These are questions you can ask when you're identifying, like, what trainings do you want to offer? What people do you want to introduce them to? What programs do you have in your office that they might need to be aware of? So in our courts clerk's office, we have 4 core values. These are quality, fairness, integrity, and transparency. These values get introduced on the very first day and are really drilled in during the whole orientation, or onboarding, so that we can really hone in on what our organizational culture is for those employees from the time they start. The second pillar is the vision and direction of leadership. For this one, the first question you want to ask yourself is, what is your organization's vision? Does everyone in here know what your court's vision is, or your office vision? Does everyone have a strategic plan? If not, you might want to get one. And I know that the National Center for State Courts has an excellent program on strategic visioning and planning. Discussing this mission and vision early helps to clearly define the strategic priorities of your organization, your department, and your team. So while going through these sections, your employees should start to develop an understanding of how their position contributes to accomplishing these strategic priorities. So this is something that they can also discuss with their supervisor after they finish onboarding to ensure that they really understand, how does my role fit into the overall mission and vision of our court? I want to talk a little bit about why this is so important. Firstly, new staff should know what their organization values and works toward before being taught how to perform their duties. And secondly, answering these who, what, and why questions gives employees a sense of belonging and helps to gather buy-in. So the questions I mean by this are, who are we? What is my role in this organization? And why is my role important? By giving them that answer of why is my role important, you can really help them to embrace that ownership of their role and really want them to be successful in the long run. And this also promotes a stronger company culture through uniformity of messaging. The third pillar is your team dynamics. So understanding team dynamics is a vital part of integrating a new hire into your organization. This includes addressing areas such as how your team communicates. So do you do everything by email? Do you use Teams? Do you use some other sort of method of collaboration? How do you work together on projects and assignments? How do you divide your tasks? And then introducing your employee to key members of the organization, such as your department heads or people they might need to interact with frequently. Some questions you might want to ask yourself here are, what is the communication style of your organization, or even more specifically of their team, if you have different sections that you might be working with? How do your teams usually accomplish their work? And how can we incorporate some non-work related discussion into their onboarding? So this is about helping them to forge some new relationships and to actually, I hesitate to say make some friends at work, but there's not really a better way to say it. Have those connections at work where it gives them something to look forward to and they have those bonds. The fourth pillar is your systems, processes, and deliverables. So your onboarding program should outline what processes the new hire is going to be responsible for, identify who they need to communicate with, and what services and programs they will need to navigate. So this is a good time to introduce them to things like any state or federal court systems they need to use. So for example, in the federal system, we have a system called JNet, and it's basically like a judiciary intranet. That's where we can go to look up rules and policies for the whole federal judiciary. You might want to introduce them to things like their HR systems for how they can input their leave and telework policies, and your court's internal systems and intranets. And finally, The onboarding program should give the new hire as many clear and quantifiable goals, standards, and expectations as possible. So these are going to apply across the office and organization, include also their individual expectations. So you might want to talk to them about, the clerk's office as a whole. We anticipate that we want to meet these key performance indicators. We want to hit these markers. As an individual, here's what we expect of you. So you might want to ask yourself some questions like, what are our performance goals and how are they measured? How will I know if I've met them? What expectations will my team have of me and what can I expect from them? How and when will I receive feedback from my leaders? And what policies do I need to be aware of? So hopefully, the theory of the core principles of the onboarding program makes sense. And now, I think what most people have come here for is to get an idea of how to do this. How do I put this into practice? So we're going to look at how we do this at the Federal Circuit. In 2020, the Clerk's Office at the Federal Circuit started a new onboarding program that addresses the points we've spoken about. I'll be bringing up some of the other initiatives that we do, that we introduce during our onboarding program. So if there's any other programs and things that you have some questions about, you can note those down and either ask some questions at the end or find me later, and we can discuss those further. So, the features of our program. We want to make this as easy as possible, so we provide them with a few really important resources. The first 5 to 7 days where we have our onboarding program is not position specific, so they're not actually learning how to do their job. Everyone is going through the same program, and you're going to see what that program looks like, and that'll hopefully make a little bit more sense, that everyone learns the same things to get them assimilated into the culture. The second is that they have a singular point of contact. It can be really overwhelming when you come into a new job because you don't know who to contact for different things. So you don't want to feel like a burden because you just keep going to your supervisor or going to the same person all the time. This point of contact can help direct them to what resources or advise them who is the best person to go to for the questions. So in our office, that's me, because as the office administrator, they're going to need to come to me for a lot of stuff anyway. And I work with a lot of the other departments and stuff, so it's an easy first point of contact, and it helps me to build that relationship with the new staff members, but also for them to know they can just come to me with any question, helps to alleviate that stress of like, oh no, where do I go now? And freeze up. We store everything on a SharePoint hub, so all of the information is located in one main site, and they can just go there and click through to whatever different trainings they need to do. And finally, I love checklists. So we have a couple of checklists that we use during our program to help us to facilitate, but also to help the new hire to ensure that they're keeping up with whatever work they need to do. So our timeline. The timeline of our onboarding program actually starts from the interview. I'll talk a little bit about what this means. So during our interview process, we look at this not just as an opportunity to interview a new candidate, but they're also interviewing us. So we want to sell them what it's like to work at the Federal Circuit. And I actually remember my interview and Patrick, who is here today, giving me the little spiel about the Federal Circuit and how it is unique among the 13 circuits and all of this. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a pretty good place to work. They talked about the projects that they do and the innovations and the awards that the office has won. And I was like, I want to be a part of that. We want all of our potential candidates to feel that way so that when we choose someone, they're also choosing us and they're excited about that prospect. We then go on to a welcome email. That happens a couple of weeks before they start. Then we have specific things that we want to take care of on their first day. They go through a modular learning program. It's comprised of 8 modules. After they're finished, there is some time for reflection and feedback. And then we have a series of follow-up meetings that we put them through, and that continues on through their first year, just to have those regular check-ins. So, before they get started, this is exhibit number 1, the facilitator checklist. I created this because I'm not great at remembering all of these things that I need to do before someone new starts. So this is including things like setting up their signage in the office to make sure that they have their nameplate where their desk is set up and they feel like, okay, this is my workstation. It's setting up all the meetings that they need to have during their first week, and that's HR and IT and different supervisors, et cetera. And other things such as planning their welcome breakfast or a lunch or something. Every time that we go through another iteration of onboarding, I make notes of any additional things that we need to add to that. And then when someone new is starting, I'll print this off and just pop the name on it of who I'm working on and just check them off as I set everything up. Now, this is helpful for me, but it's also helpful for whoever's going to come after me because I probably won't be the facilitator forever. And this means that when I go on to do something bigger and better, I can hand this to the next person and say, here's what you need to do. Next, the welcome email. Now, our HR department, of course, is going to be having communication with them, but that's going to be about their benefits and their contract and all of the paperwork that they have to do. And it's usually pretty dry. It's just very like businessy. So a couple of weeks before someone starts, I'll send them an email to just introduce myself, let them know I'm your point of contact, and give them some preliminary information. This includes things like what to wear. We find especially when we have people coming straight out of college, they may not have had a professional job before, they might not know exactly what they need to wear, so I'll give them a little snippet of here's how you should dress for, whether we're in court that week or whether it's just, a business casual thing, letting them know what to wear just to alleviate that stress. When they need to arrive, and this is a good opportunity. Being in DC, we often get people who are relocating because they, just finished college and they want to come to DC and work for the government. So we can have that conversation of where they might be living, what do your train schedules look like, what time might you need to leave your house. If you're coming in from Baltimore and you have to take the MARC train and it gets in at 8:15, well, we can shift your start. So it allows you to have that conversation a little bit early. Where you need to go. This is a big one for me. So when I moved to DC and I started at the Federal Circuit, I got dropped off in the morning and my GPS took me to the White House, and our office is right by the White House, but the road was blocked by the Secret Service. They did not want to let me through, even though I told them who I was. Then it started raining, and I was trying to call my boss, and I was like, I don't know where I am. He was like, look for Joe's Crab Shack, and I was like, okay. Anyway, found my way. Unfortunately, my ID card, I still look like a drowned rat because I had to get my photo taken, but based on that experience, I decided I didn't want anyone else to go through that, so I now take a photo from Google Maps and show them exactly where the entrance is and tell them what they need to put in the GPS to get to that entrance, just to make it easy for those of us who are directionally challenged. What to expect. So you probably have security at your courthouse that they have to go through. For us, that means certain things have to come out of your bag, so you may want to pack your bag appropriately to make it easy to pull things out. What's going to happen on their first day? What does their lunch break look like? Are there good places to go and eat nearby? And then give them the opportunity to ask questions. I find that most people ask questions really about what there is to eat nearby. Or if there's a kitchen, it always revolves around food. And then we get to their first day. So when the new hire arrives, we have our security staff give me a call, and as they're going through the security screening process, I'll come down to meet them and escort them to their workstation. We make sure that their workstation is already set up for them, and this is like the best angle I could get of a cubicle. And I'll show you a few things that we make sure that they already have set up. So we have them installed with this little light, which is called a Luxifor light. It's a system of communication, going back to the pillars, that we use in our office to communicate what your status is. And that means, are you busy? Can you be interrupted? Are you free to talk if I have a question? So you can turn it different colors with an app on your computer. So you can have it like red, yellow, green. And it's really nice because sometimes when I want to go and interrupt someone and it's not really important and I see their lights red, I'll be like, okay, I'll wait until later. This is what I was talking about, the office signage. So we use a template that card just slides in and out. So we make sure that their workstation already has their name on it so they feel like, okay, this is official. I'm now part of this team. We have everyone in the office sign a little welcome card for them, and that's waiting for them on their desk just to make them feel really at home. We print them business cards. So this is something that we started doing actually because of conferences, because we found like when someone had to go to a conference and they don't have business cards, it always took way too long to get them. There's a company called Avery that we can actually print them in-house. So we designed a template, and when someone new's starting, I print off about 50 business cards, and I would tell you, particularly for people who have never worked in a job that had business cards before, they get so excited, right? They're like, I'm a grown-up now, right? I will say I realized earlier when I was reviewing my slides, I did not print myself business cards for today. So if you want to connect, you're going to have to give me yours. You also can see below their business cards, they have a name tag. So again, we make these in-house, so they're very easy to swap in and out if someone new starts, if someone leaves. We just print them in-house, pop them in. The sheet over there with all the different colors on it, that is our one page of our mission, vision, and core values. And everyone's workstation has a little bulletin board, so everyone has this hanging up because we want to keep that front and center of mind. What is our mission? What is our vision? What is our core values? The paper that is behind it is a one-page sheet that we call the life of an appeal. And that is basically the flow chart of how a case moves through our court. And so it's kind of helpful just to visualize what the process is in the clerk's office from the time a case is docketed all the way up until a final opinion is issued. And then we make sure that they have stationery so that they're ready to get set up and get started. We also provide them with their schedule. So as you saw on the initial checklist, I have a series of meetings that I have set up. These are all put onto their calendar before they start because IT likes to get their email address set up a few days in advance. So I send them meeting invitations between them, whoever they're meeting with, and then I include myself on it so that I can keep track of where they're going and make sure that they get where they need to be. Excuse me. And then I like to print them off a hard copy of it as well, just to sort of visualize the whole week. So a few key things that we have. Firstly, we always start with IT because there is nothing worse than getting to a job and you can't get logged in and you can't do anything and you're just sitting there looking at like an idiot. We also have their HR onboarding on the first day so they can get all their paperwork done. We like to do a welcome breakfast. This was for someone who was in the circuit executive's office, so we held it in the circuit executive's office suite. We either do a breakfast, a lunch, or like an afternoon tea or something like that. And then during COVID, we actually did it on Zoom. So everyone just brought their own lunch and Zoomed in, and it was a good way for the new hire to get to meet everybody, start to make those connections, and then during the day, it opens up and facilitates some of those conversations. They have their swearing in, so when they get sworn in as a deputy clerk, they do that with the circuit executive. That's a good opportunity for anyone who's not in the CE office to get to meet the circuit executive and kind of be familiarizing themselves with, different people in the building, and lets him to get to know them as well. After that, we get them started into their onboarding. So this is a modular learning. It starts with their introduction session. The introduction is the unit that I like to call what you need to know to not get fired. So that includes like your confidentiality, your ethics stuff, leave and telework policies, those sort of basic things that you really need to know to get started on your job. Then we have an overview of the federal circuit. We have an overview of the clerk's office. At the moment, because I just moved from the clerk's office to the circuit executive office, we're looking to expand this to the rest of our operations staff. And so what we'll do here is whatever office you're in, that will be the unit that you do on this section. Then we talk about the mission and vision. And then we get into our core values. So as I mentioned earlier, we have core values of fairness, quality, transparency, and integrity. These 4 core values that we have were determined by our staff. So we had a whole session that we worked with a consultant to really determine what things were most important to us and to decide on these as a team to get that buy-in. So these are the 4 core values. Each one has a unit, and we have a variety of trainings based around that to try to help explain to a new hire, what does fairness mean to us? What does transparency mean in our court? So this is what our SharePoint hub looks like. All of the modules are stored here. You can see them down at the bottom, and it does scroll on across. So everything is stored here. We do specify to them that you don't have to memorize any of it. All of this material stays available, so any of our staff can go back and look at it. I sometimes find myself going back to this because it's something that I need to find, and I'm like, I know that we talk about that in onboarding, I'm just gonna look there. Then each of the new hires gets their own checklist. So this was something we started about a year ago to help people keep track of what they've already done. So if you know, like if you guys use SharePoint, you can't necessarily see if you've already viewed something on there. So this is a way to help them to check off what they've done because they may not do everything in order. Sometimes you might find a login to a specific site's not working and you have to skip that one and come back to it. And then we added in the estimated amount of time of completion of each of these. So if it's a video, that's an easy one. If it's a reading, I found a website online that you can copy and paste and it'll tell you about how long it should take to read it. But this is so that if someone has a meeting in half an hour, they will know, okay, well that gives me enough time to read the judicial social media policy. They know what they can accomplish in that time that they have. And so this is for each of the modules, so it's about 2 pages. We use a variety of different methods of training. So we use in-person meetings, and we try to scatter these a little bit throughout the week to kind of break things up. We have some online learning modules, and we use a lot of different sources to find these. We, of course, have readings, which we try to not overwhelm people with readings because that can get really monotonous. And then we have some interactive activities. So I want to talk about the interactive activities because these are some that we find our new hires really enjoy. The first is our scavenger hunt. So this is something that we use to help introduce them to systems. So again, back to the pillars, the systems that people will need to know. As I mentioned, JNet is the federal judiciary's intranet. It is massive and there is a lot of information on there, and just showing someone where it is not really that helpful. I mean, like, oh, here's where you go, right? Instead, we give them a task and we want you to go and find this specific thing and answer this question. So it just helps them to learn how to navigate the systems in an interactive way without actually like asking them to read the whole thing. We're not gonna ask them to read the Guide to Judiciary Policy, but I wanna know that if you have a question, you know how to find it. We make sure that they do have a building tour, and we try to fit this in on the first day so that they know where everything is, particularly, as I mentioned, the snack room, which was the only thing that I took away from my building tour. Our building is quite big, and it's got some historic buildings attached to it, which are like a maze to get through, so it's good to just familiarize people with it. But one thing that we aim to do with the building tour is that it's conducted by someone that they otherwise won't interact with that week. So it's not one of the supervisors, it's not one of their team members, it's gonna be somebody different to try to help them get that connection. Typically, I have someone from our quality management team do it because people don't normally know what quality management team members do, so it gives them a chance to connect with them and start to ask them questions. So then, Unit 2, we start to talk about the federal circuit. This is designed for someone who's starting without a court background, but it's also helpful for people who are coming from other types of courts because it's specific to our court. We've had quite a few people who transfer in from other courts, but they might come from a district court, or if you were, say, coming from a state court, it can operate completely differently. And you might not even understand how does it fit into the broader judiciary. So that's what this is designed for. An example of something that we would include in this is the FJC, the Federal Judicial Center, has a training called an Introduction to the Federal Courts. So for me, for example, I came from a background as a travel agent. I could not remember much from my high school civics class when we talked about the federal judiciary. So this was really helpful to understand how the whole network works and then where does our court fit into it. The next unit, as I mentioned, we give them specific about their office. So we have the clerk's office overview here, which includes snapshot. This is something that's on the intranet for anyone in our court to see. It talks about what court services does, what are their functions, and then introduces you to the team members. So as you can see, we have our court services manager, JP, who's sitting up here. and then all the team members. Now, you're going to look and you're going to see, okay, well, we have a court services administrator. I don't know what that means. You'll see that each of these names is hyperlinked, and if you click on that job title, it takes you to their job description. So you can actually see, okay, well, what's the difference between Mila's responsibilities and Mike's responsibilities? And you can go and compare those two job descriptions. You'll also see that each person's name has a hyperlink on it. If you click on their name, what you're going to get taken to is their user manual. And what is a user manual, you might ask? It's this. And that is me hiking, giving my peace signs. So everyone in our court fills in this user manual. And we upload these to the internet, and you can be as vulnerable or as vague as you really want on here, because it's up to you, because this is about how to work with you. There's a few key things that we like to include on here. One thing that we include is how do we want you to communicate. So this is my user manual, and I have put on here that, if you have something that you need me to do, it's best if you send me an email, because Teams messages get lost, so emails will stay on my task list. We include our personality type. So we use something called DISC training. This is a personality test. We have a consultant that comes in, and she teaches us all about the different personality types so that you have a better understanding of your own personality traits and your own work style. But then you learn about your colleagues, and it also will show you, how do you best work together, or what things might create some friction between your different styles. So everyone goes through this. So if you're going to have to work on a project with me, you can come and see my user manual and see what type of personality I am. I am a DI, which means I am loud and pushy. We also have how to help me. So these are things that you can do that's going to actually help facilitate a better working relationship. And then my favorite part is my interests outside of work, because we can then talk about other things we're interested in, and again, start to try to make those connections. So through this, I learned that one of my colleagues also is a terrible golfer like me, and now we go golfing every couple of weeks. So you can find those ways to make relationships and make friendships within work. Speaking of communication, under this module, we'll talk about how we communicate via email. So in our office, we have this specific way of setting up emails that the subject line, we tell you what type of email it is. Is it a task? Is it just for your information? Is it something urgent, etc.? So for this one, I have a task, and in the subject line, I put when it's due. Then we use the sum and details method. So the sum is just going to be like a one-sentence overview of what this is about, and then in the details, I'm going to give you more information. Now, because this is the expectation of how people communicate, it's really important, I think, to introduce that early on, because if you're not used to this, it seems very formal, very direct, and very cold. But then once you know, okay, well, this is the expectation because it helps people to, filter through their emails, then you can start to follow along. The next unit that we talk about is our mission and vision. So we start by explaining what our mission and our vision are. And then we have several things about how we, like our strategic plan, our annual plan. We have annual reports in there so we can see how we actually organize our projects and how we work toward our goals that we set out in our mission and vision. You can see that we have an in-person presentation, which is our strategic planning and program management. And that is something that we talk about with our strategic alignment. So every probably 5 years or so, we have a new strategic plan that we create, and then based on that, we create our annual plans, and based on that, we have our projects that we have. That's a lot, and when you start to learn about project management, and you start to learn about project teams, and racing matrix, and all these different terms that get thrown out, it's really helpful to get a little bit more guidance on that, because you're going to start hearing these terms around the office. So in this section, they'll have some of the electronic training, which is about project management. So they get the basics of it. And then they meet with our special programs coordinator, who talks to them about what our strategic alignment working group does, what his job is, and then what do project managers and project team members do. So they have a really good understanding of it, because eventually they're going to be put onto a project team. Then we get into our core values. So the last 4 units are based around our core values. So one of our core values is fairness. We talk to them about things like how to work with upset customers. How do we work with our people over the phone, because most of our interactions with people come over the phone. You'll notice here we have something called our Public Experience Operating Manual. So this is something that we created just as a guide to frequently asked questions and how best to answer them and how to interact with the public. But what we've said there is just read the first couple of parts and then skim through the rest to be familiar with the document. One of the trainings that we have them do then is the National Center for State Courts based on procedural fairness. Now, I mentioned that we have 4 core values. Something that we do here, talking about kind of teamwork and team dynamics, is that we have our peer recognition board. And this is based around those 4 core values that they're learning about during onboarding. This is something that we created to kind of get rid of a little bit of the hierarchy. And, normally it's just your supervisor telling you did a good job. What we wanted to encourage was for team members to recognize each other for doing a good job. And we found pretty good success with this. Basically what they do is they determine, well, which core value are you embodying? And then you can just put up a card to say, this person really embodied fairness. I heard them on the phone with a customer and they exhibited great patience and really talked them through what they needed to do, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of each of the units, they complete a unit completion form. What this does is helps us to just keep track of how long it takes them to get through each unit so that in the future we can help plan their days and when they're going to get turned over to their supervisor for their job-specific training. So it's just more of a timing thing. And then at the end, they have a reflection. So once they've gotten through all of the onboarding, they get asked some questions about the role and mission of the court, the role and mission of the clerk's office, the strategic vision and goals, and applying core values. So what this reflection is really about to see if they've absorbed the material. And if they haven't, it's an encouragement for them to go back and review whatever they maybe didn't quite understand, or to start conversations with people. If they're like, hey, I really didn't get that bit about project management, I might need to talk to somebody about it to really understand more. So these are those opportunities early to get them to have that full integration. After that, they have some follow-up meetings. So the Professional Development Working Group is the one who is responsible for the onboarding program. So they have a feedback session with members of, we call it PDOG for short. I am not part of that. I am part of PDOG, but I am not part of this conversation because I'm the facilitator, and we want people to have the opportunity to talk about my performance as a facilitator if they need to without me sitting there staring at them. So they give some feedback on things that went really well, maybe things that they struggled with, and we take that feedback and we work on the next iteration of the program. At 30 days, they have a check-in with the chief deputy clerk or whoever their unit supervisor is, if that's administrative services or something like that. So they have a 30-day check-in. And then we continue on at 60 and 120 days, they have check-ins with their supervisor. Now, this is going to be more in tune with what they're doing for their job-specific training. And of course, they're going to be having other discussions with them, but these are specific meetings that are set up for this purpose of checking in with how things are going with their training. And then at 6 months and 1 year, they have another check-in with the chief deputy clerk. This helps our chief deputy to keep up with what's going on in the different sections and really just make sure to kind of gauge that temperature of, okay, are they where they need to be at this point? So, having said all that, before we get into the results of our onboarding program, I want you to maybe get back with the same people you were talking with before or new people if they've come in, and just discuss thinking about the 5 pillars that we talked about and thinking about some of the ideas that we've discussed here today. What are some things that maybe have come to mind for you that you would like to implement in your court for a new onboarding program? So I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes to discuss. Sorry, I've just gotten word that the next room is getting jealous that we're having so much fun. So if we could lower voices a little bit, because they're complaining that they can hear us. Okay. If I could have everyone bring it back. So, great to hear some lively discussion. Hopefully it was all about onboarding. So would anyone like to share anything that they have kind of thought of, whether it be something that you're like, oh, I want to take that back, or maybe it just sparked an idea of something that you would like to do with your own onboarding program? Oh, no. The questions are at the end.
Well, it's about onboarding.
Okay.
The picture you showed with the cubicle, the desk lights.
Yeah.
How do I find that on Amazon? What am I looking for?
So I think that company is based out of Lithuania or somewhere. It's some Estonia maybe. Anyway, I can just tell you the name of it. It's Luxafor, Luxafor. We're not endorsing any product.
Maybe
do
put
not-
it in the chat.
They do not sponsor us or anything. It just happens to be something we found. But I'm sure there's other companies that do something similar. It's just a little magnetic light that you stick on, and then there's an app that gets installed on your desktop, and you can control it from there. Another.
So a couple of things that we talked about was the fact how the cube, the workstation, was a little bit more personalized for the individual employee, because I think the first impression is really important, not only for us as leaders, but for the people that we're onboarding. So that's one takeaway that we really liked. The other is we talked a bit about how some of our supervisors were at the mercy of how they approach the onboarding process, where if we're not careful, some of the other employees who may not work for that said supervisor who's very proactive can view that as a, why can't the agency or the business be consistent across the board? So that's some of the takeaways we talked about and we're going to try to implement.
It's really great. And actually that is something, because this is something we started in the clerk's office, and as I mentioned, we're expanding to the rest of the court, partly because we did find that other court units were like, oh, we we don't do anything like that. And as far as the supervisors, one thing I would like to mention, so during that onboarding week, every new employee has a meeting with each of the supervisors in the clerk's office. The professional development working group created PowerPoint presentations for each of those supervisors to use to ensure that with every meeting, they're giving a uniform message of what their section is responsible for. It takes the burden off of them. They don't have to prepare anything. What I do is I link that PowerPoint into the meeting invitation. So when they come in, they just open it up out of their Outlook, and there's their presentation. They just have to go through it. And we make sure for every time that we have a new onboarding, we just check it and make sure everything's up to date. So we make sure that everybody's getting the same information. Yeah. Anyone else have something they would like to share?
One thing that I did like about your kind of like snippet of who I am is that you put how you like to communicate and also the DIS style. So it's kind of very clear for that person and they understand how they can work with you as well. So
Yeah. And a lot of times people will put information about, in the morning is when I like to just be left alone and do my own work. I prefer to have a meeting in the afternoon or vice versa.
A follow-up on that, because I like the idea, but not all of us are as blessed to work for the feds as others. And so many of us have to consider open records requests. So I wondered how all your employees took to writing down things that are a little bit personal on something that could be open recorded. Or if that was the concern at all for you.
Well, so for one, this is just in our intranet site. So it's only accessible to people from our office or to our court. The other thing is that you can choose how much you want to share. You can get very personal if you want to, or you can be very surfacey and just say things like, hey, best communication with me is send me a Teams message for this, it's not so, I don't think it's so personal that there would be anything like that could be used negatively against you, if that makes sense. So I have absolutely no problems with anyone in the court or in the world knowing what my hobbies are. I like to read. Yeah.
We have one from the chat.
Sure.
Antoinette says, I really like the email format with tasks, sum, and details. If you don't mind sharing, can you list some of the other ways that internal correspondence is coded?
Oh, gosh. No, you're testing me. So we have things like action. And so that's going to tell someone, it's a little bit less intense than task. So task is I need you to do something. Action is a little bit more when you get to it. We also have things like info, and that's just things that you just need to read. We have hot action, which is something that needs to be addressed more urgently. What are there other ones I'm missing? I think that's just about all. Yeah, it's really just info, action, and task are the main ones. But you could use whatever is relevant for your court. If someone brings in donuts on a Friday, it's usually a hot action, and we all run. Okay, so we'll have a little bit of time for questions at the end. But first, I want to talk a little bit about our onboarding survey results. So when we finish the onboarding, we give surveys because we love surveys at the Federal Circuit. But I want to show you some of the questions that we ask and what the responses have been. So after going through onboarding, we ask that, to what extent do you agree? And we didn't just give them the strongly agree and agree. We gave them the disagree, neutral, all that stuff. So I understand the mission and general work of the clerk's office. So you can see that 100% of our people that have gone through this program have either strongly agreed or agreed with this. I understand how my role contributes to the vision and mission of the clerk's office. Again, 100% either strongly agree or agree. And then I understand the core values of the clerk's office, 100% strongly agreed because we really drill it into them. At 30 days, before they have that 30-day check-in with the chief deputy clerk, we have another survey. Again, I always put that in their meeting invitation, so it's right there for them, easy to find. We ask them how often they've applied, referenced, or used the skills or concepts from the units that we give them. And at this time, we weren't doing the intro. That's been a very recent change. But information about the Federal Circuit, they use it weekly. Information about the clerk's office, either daily or weekly. Mission and vision, daily or weekly, and then the 4 core values. Pretty well split, sort of 50 to 75% use it daily, and the other on weekly. At 60 and 120 days, as I mentioned, this is when they are checking in with their supervisor, and this is a little bit more about their job-specific training. So we're asking them questions like, I'm confident using the systems I need in my role. This is a great opportunity for that supervisor to identify if someone doesn't feel confident, we need to address that early. So at that 2-month mark, that's a great time to be like, okay, you're not confident, let's backtrack for a minute and see what we need to do to get you where you need to be. I have received sufficient training on the processes and responsibilities currently assigned to me. And I understand how my role contributes to the mission of the clerk's office. And that's an important one for us to understand from onboarding because we want to make sure that they understand that before they actually get into their job. Now, of course, things change over time, processes change, communications change. How do we keep it current? So I will say, a federal circuit, we are a little bit smaller court. We don't have an onboarding every day. They're a little bit more sporadic than that. But after someone is onboarded, when they give that feedback, professional development group works, the working group meets, and they say, okay, cool, what feedback did we get? What changes might we want to implement before the next person gets onboarded? And so we just do it right then. So if someone says, hey, I got really confused by this training, all right, cool. Do we need to change it up and put a different training on that might be a little bit more digestible? Then during recruitment. So currently we are recruiting for a case manager. If anyone's interested, you can find the posting on our website. But while we're recruiting, we're thinking about, okay, once we hire, we're gonna have to onboard somebody. So let's review and make sure all of our links are accurate. Let's make sure that all of the information is up to date. Has anyone's job title changed? Has anyone's changed roles or anything like that? So we go through and we make sure that everything is up to date. So that is all I have for you. Hopefully, you will be taking away a few things today. The first thing that I hope you got is that what the organization values and how the new hire fits in is imperative to have in your onboarding program. Secondly, you should have a logical structure to your program, and your new hire should have proactive guidance. And thirdly, your program should include a variety of learning materials to keep your new hires stimulated and engaged with the training. So, thank you very much. This is how you can connect with me. Please note that my name is spelled incorrectly on the app, so don't look me up on that. And some information, again, this is one of the core achievement program qualifying classes, so if you want to email core@nacmnet.org, you can get your structured response or get it through the app. I think you said it's going to be updated, right? Also, if you are interested in pursuing one of the achievements or the certificates, sessions from previous conferences can be found on the NACM Core website, which is nacmcore.org. If you can't find them there, because I tried to find them and I couldn't, email core@nacmnet.org and they can help point you to those. So, does anybody have any questions? I think the way you're supposed to phrase it is, what questions do you have, right?
How many people were in your survey?
How many people in the survey? So that was data from 2020 till 2022. I think during that time, I would say probably about 6 or 7. Like I said, the office is small. So in the clerk's office, we had about 18 to 20 people at any given time. We will be getting more data based on expanding it to the rest of the court. So that will include our administrative services, our IT department, and everything.
So your process is really in-depth. It's on point, A+. For someone who doesn't have, let's say, anything.
Yep.
How would you recommend starting? I know you take a bite out of an elephant.
Yeah.
One bite at a time, I believe is what it is. So how would you just get started?
So if you want to take the shortcut, what you can do is email me and I'll send you the checklist for the new hires. So I've made a checklist that I can't put it in a PDF and give it to you because the hyperlinks won't work on that, on like a printout, but I created a copy of our new hire checklist in which I hyperlinked everything that's not specific to our court. Now, I will say that because we're federal, there are some links that won't work if you're in a state court, but that will at least give you an idea of, okay, well, here's where they talk about the ethics policy. So what is my court's ethics policy? Let me sub that in. Then you just need to find some place to house it all. We are very lucky that we have a couple people in our office who are really great at building stuff on SharePoint. So if you have someone that can help you set that up, great. Otherwise, just find a way that you can store all the information, even if it's just doing the links. And I will also say, looking through whatever resources you have for training. So in our office, we have a corporate subscription to LinkedIn Learning. Again, I'm not endorsing any products here. But I've just found that something like that is really helpful because there's all these trainings already created for you and you don't have to start from scratch. You can say, let me find a training that talks about customer service, and it's right there. We also use things that we found on YouTube that are introductory to like the judiciary. I found a really fun one that has great little cartoon graphics and stuff and is entertaining, but explains to you how the circuits work in the judiciary. Yes.
Hi. What do you do when you receive negative survey results? Do you just notify the supervisor, or do you have specific trainings for the questions? Or?
Well, we're awesome at our jobs, and we don't receive negative. No, I'm just kidding. No. So again, we do like a lot of surveys and stuff, and so we have other types of things. Employee engagement surveys that we do, for example. And occasionally you might find that things in the office climate have changed and maybe some people aren't happy. We do generally address that. Now, a survey like this, of course, is not anonymous, but a lot of surveys need to be anonymous to actually get accurate data. So especially something like a climate survey. I will say when we've had some negative feedback in the past, where obviously something was going on that we weren't really clear about, we have a couple of things. Number one, we've had kind of like a town hall style meeting to talk about talk about the survey results and say, hey, like, is there anything anybody wants to bring up? Another thing that we did was one of our supervisors, who everybody recognizes as being very caring and confidential, offered to have people come and speak to him one-on-one to express any concerns that they may not be comfortable with talking about in an open forum like that. And we got some good feedback that way, where people were a little bit more honest about like, hey, I gave negative remarks on this because I'm feeling this way about my training or whatever. So it can be difficult if people are putting something negative and maybe not telling you why. But the best thing that you can do is just open up lines of communication and make people feel like they have a safe space to express those concerns. Oh dear.
Hi, I'm with Katie's court, so that's why she just said, oh dear. I will try to make this a question, but it's probably more of a commentary.
Okay.
For everyone's benefit. So I was at the court when we started this program initially, and it was nothing close to the amazing thing that Katie has put together for us. And there was a comment earlier about the abundance of the federal courts and whatever. We're being recorded, right? Hi. Only by comparison, because the state courts don't fund their courts the way they should. But almost with the exception of those Lucifer lights and the LinkedIn Learning stuff, everything else we did with no money. So these are all free resources that we did. Before we had LinkedIn Learning, we found like free videos on YouTube as training for people. So I can't think of this as a question, but you don't have to spend money a lot. It's more of, what is that? Well, you don't. I mean, you don't. You can do. It's more of the concept is you don't have to spend like all the stuff that Katie put together. Like we, print our own name tags, or we print our own name tags. We print our own business cards. Yeah. Those are just basic. We put the office supplies together as like a gift basket type of thing because we can't spend money on that stuff. I feel this I have to say because we are recording, the breakfast and whatever, it's either people bring their own or I personally pay for it. So just don't let the money be an obstacle. It's the concepts with this are what's important. And we spend little to no money developing this. And I think originally portions of the SharePoint stuff we actually did with interns who got college credit, so we didn't even pay for that aspect of it. So if you have that opportunity where you are, and they have more technical skills than most of us have who've been doing this for a bit, that's another potential way you could use some of those resources. And if you don't have SharePoint, a basic HTML type of thing with just a list of links, which is what we originally had. So I guess I will make it a question. Katie, what do you think about what I just said?
Well, you're my boss, so I feel compelled to agree. No, I agree, and I think that you can really get creative. So, for example, in our office, something that we do to forge relationships between people, we've put on a couple of potlucks, and people love it. People in our office love to cook, they love to bake. Again, that's not costing the court any money because everybody's bringing something in. We've done that to celebrate. For example, we have a couple of members of the AAPI community in our office who hosted a potluck during AAPI month, and everybody brought in their best inspired dish. So you can get creative in ways to make it work. And I found even in our office, this may not work for yours, but when I say, hey, we have a new employee starting, who wants to bring something in? Like, I get a great response. So I think maybe if we have like one more question, otherwise we got to go for the networking break. Okay.
All right, can we give it up for Katie?
Yeah.